At first, I didn't really understand the point or depiction of the article. I must have not read the instructions as well as I ought to have. Then, upon understanding that it was a satirical article meant to make a point to Miner's fellow anthropologists, I realized that the Nacirema is American backward and had to sit for a moment and chide myself while laughing way too hard for not recognizing it until halfway through the article. It was very well written and apparently so great at making Americans seem ritualistic in order to prove a point that I didn't know it was, in fact, describing Americans, and in my head I was imagining your typical, as seen in movies, African village. As mentioned in Rachel Newer's article, Miner describes toothbrushing, the strange routine of seeing the dentist, ladies getting their hair done, and even how strange the unspoken rules about sex are in America. He uses the words magic quite a bit and ritual. He also makes it a point to emphasize just how strange everything is, that a lot of it seems useless, unnecessary, or our social expectations unfounded. This really sells how ridiculous any culture can seem to the outside observer. It has come to my attention that the Nacirema have another strange ritual, one which appears to be an attempt at greeting one another. I've seen it come in many, many different forms. Most of the time they will connect hands by the palm and bounce them up and down. Sometimes even this simple gesture can, I've discovered, say a lot about the individuals engaging in it. Sometimes it lasts longer than a moment, and the two individuals smile at each other. Sometimes the bouncing is quick and stiff, and the smiling is absent altogether. Yet other times individuals will do the same, then immediately pull each other in and hit each other on the back as if they are babies needing to be burped. Other times individuals will flatten their hand, stand stiffly, and press the side of their hand to their hairline. Most of the time the receiver will respond in kind, but occasionally they do not. Still other times individuals will greet each other by their wrists and bounce them a little, as mentioned before. Here they are more likely to smile as well. Different handshakes mean different things. Different people have different handshakes. A firm, quick handshake means something different than a handshake that leads into a hug. Some people don't do handshakes at all, but hug instead. This is not always two-sided. A salute means something much different than a grasp of the arm from either person, though they both mean respect. The second one is traditionally more personal, meaning that the two shaking are more than likely very close, but still address each other with respect. The history of the handshake is actually somewhat more interesting than one would like to think. For handshakes specifically, it began as a tradition from much further back in history than one would think. Surprisingly, there are even murals, carvings, and writings from all the way back to the Assyrians, all describing and or depicting different handshakes. It was a symbol of alliance, then greeting, promise, friendship, and reunion. According to the Getty Museum, it can also symbolize, quote, an ongoing connection between the deceased and the living. Dissimilar to most symbols and gestures throughout history, handshakes have not seen much change and in fact have retained their original meaning and even form. It's had some minor transformations here and there, and some fluctuations in its use, interestingly enough. Of course, today, greetings seldom look the same in between cultures, but the handshake is among one of the oldest of these greetings. Today, Americans, and some of the world with us, still use the handshake to greet. While the argument can be made that greeting in any culture is important, others are beginning to think that perhaps handshakes in particular should be eradicated completely. With the advent of COVID nearly 2 years ago, handshakes quickly fizzled out. As physical greetings have done for millennia when a pandemic is going around, fear, danger, and not so blissful ignorance has encouraged citizens all over the world to stop handshaking completely. When the tail end of the pandemic was coming around, people began to question, should the handshake come back? Dr. Anthony Fauci has his suspicions, saying in a podcast that he feels we shouldn't, quote, ever shake hands ever again, end quote, because not only could it, quote, prevent coronavirus, end quote, but it also has the potential to, quote, decrease the incidence of influenza dramatically in this country, unquote.